he should have a pause about. He was asked a question, what's your top priority in government? And he gave a reply, child poverty, the elimination of child poverty, which is a worthy, noble aim for any government to have. The problem is that what a nationalist First Minister is meant to say is the achievement of Scottish independence, by which we'll introduce social and economic justice, which will eliminate child poverty, pensioner poverty, fuel poverty, and bring about a better society.
Let's first welcome Kieran Andrews, the Times Scotland political editor. Hello to you, Kieran.
Evening, John.
Kieran, what did you make of John Swinney's accession speech?
Well, it was really interesting. It was both kind of Back to the Future and a kind of run of almost contradictions in some senses. John Swinney really majored on the theme of unity, of bringing people back together, not just his own party, but crucially across the Scottish Parliament. Now, that speaks to the duality of John Swinney. You know, he has a reputation as being a straight shooter, somebody who can strike backroom deals across parties and can be trusted in those kind of backroom negotiations. He is also someone who's renowned for barracking and heckling and shouting from sedentary positions during Holyrood debates, and indeed today admitted that he has to take his own share of the blame for the level of discourse in Scottish politics, which he said is the worst he has ever seen. Yes. Added to that, he was standing in front of a slogan, Stronger for Scotland, which, as he promised to look ahead and be all about the future, the words behind him were the SNP's campaign slogan from 2015.
Yeah, well, he's picking up a very difficult legacy, isn't he? I mean, what's your reading of how he'll be addressing that?
Well, look, John Swinney is the only person probably in the SNP who could have any chance of unifying the party just now, and he appears to be doing this at least early doors. He is getting the kind of honeymoon period that Humza Yousaf frankly never had as First Minister. He is promising to listen to various people. We know that Kate Forbes, the former Finance Secretary who had been tipped to be a contender to replace Humza Yousaf, will not run and instead will get a senior position at the heart of John Swinney's government. And he managed to persuade another party member who said they had the required signatures to stand against him, not to submit those, not to run, because ordinary party members would be listened to in a way that they feel they weren't under particularly Nicola Sturgeon, but also Humza Yousaf. The big question for John Swinney is whether he'll follow through on these initial words, which have gone down very well in the party.
Right. Now steering the government at Holyrood is going to be a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? As is the case with minority government, and also the management of his party, a bit of a balancing act too, which I guess starts with his cabinet appointments, including, well, the person who might have run against him, Kate Forbes.
Yeah, and we'll start to see John Swinney's cabinet be unveiled in the coming days. We expect him to be sworn in as First Minister tomorrow, and then the reshuffle will start. We'll probably know very quickly what role Kate Forbes has, and then we'll see exactly how inclusive he's going to be, which troublemakers he's going to bring in from the back benches. But as you say, it's a balancing act. It isn't just about who you bring in, because for every person you bring in, there's someone you've got to push out, and there are already some of those senior ministers in the cabinet just now who were loyal to Nicola Sturgeon, loyal to Humza Yousaf, crucially hostile to Kate Forbes and her allies, who feel that John Swinney may have given away a little bit too much already. So it will be quite the test for John Swinney to keep the party united. You saw a video from Humza Yousaf today urging unity. It was a not so subtle intervention on that front. But again, if there's anyone in the SNP who has a chance of holding these different factions together, it is John Swinney.
Interesting, Kieran. I mean, do stay with us while we say hello and good afternoon to Alex-Salmond, the former SNP First Minister, now leader of the Alaba Party. Hello to you, Alec.
Hi, John.
Hi. So, look, Alec, John Swinney, he served in the SNP while you were leader. What do you say about his qualifications to lead Scotland?
Well, certainly has the experience. And let me start by congratulating John. Being leader of the Scottish National Party is no small thing. I was there twice, so let me congratulate him on his elevation today. There are challenges ahead for him, obviously. The words I thought were pretty fine today. It was a calm and assured performance. There was one indication which I think he should have a pause about. He was asked a question, what's your top priority in government? And he gave a reply, child poverty, the elimination of child poverty, which is a worthy, noble aim for any government to have. The problem is that what a nationalist First Minister is meant to say is the achievement of Scottish independence, by which we'll introduce social and economic justice, which will eliminate child poverty, pensioner poverty, fuel poverty, and bring about a better society.
Yeah.
Now, I say this because John Swinney's first shot at leadership, which was 20 years ago now, ended basically because the activists and then his own MSPs started to doubt whether he had a strategy for getting to independence. And the one thing you must not have as an SNP leader is question marks about your strategy for getting to independence. That is the source of disagreements within the SNP.
Right. Now, I read a number of Scottish political commentators, Alec, telling us that the independence project has been stalled for a generation. Now, I don't expect you necessarily accept that, but do you accept that it's had a step back and needs to be revived?
Well, let's dismiss the commentators. These are all unionist commentators because all the Scottish newspapers, with one small exception, the National, are unionist papers. And I'm afraid too many of these people just write to rote. They do what they're told. They write unionist columns for unionist papers. So obviously it's the sort of ever-longing dream of a unionist commentariat that the cause of independence is finished. But a glance at any opinion poll in the Constitution would tell you why that's not the case. In a situation where half the population believes in it, it is absurd, ridiculous to say that the cause of independence is finished. I mean, arguably, you're in a much better position with half the population in favour, even if the SNP has been in disarray, than you were a few years ago, where the SNP was incredibly brilliantly led, but the population support for independence was down in, say, 25%. I mean, you should be able to arrange the political furniture to try and meet the public's expectation of independence easier than the generation job it is to change opinion on independence.
All right. Kieran Andrews of the Times, Scotland political editor, I'm sure you know well. He's listening to all of this. I want to bring Kieran back in. Kieran, what are you thinking about what you hear from Alex-Salmond?
Well, I think the independence point is very interesting on two levels. First of all, that run back through John Swinney's history, and of course, Alex-Salmond is right about the reasons, and he would know better than me, he was there, but about the reasons for John Swinney losing his job at that time. Obviously, it's a different situation for the SNP just now, a different kind of problem for John Swinney. The last time he led, he needed to try and pull the SNP from being a kind of opposition party struggling to make a breakthrough into government, which he ultimately failed to do. And that only happened when Alex-Salmond took over, and him and Nicola Sturgeon and others led the party to those that kind of Scottish political dominance. The other thing is the independence question is really interesting because, of course, the polls are roughly 50-50 just now. So support for independence has been really stable. Meanwhile, support for the SNP is dropping off. And that's the kind of triangulation, I suppose, that John Swinney was trying to make today, where he is hoping that he can appeal to people who believe in independence, but maybe don't necessarily have it as a top priority just now, because we see from the other thing we see from the polls is independence as a priority slipping down the ladder. Now, the danger, of course, for the SNP is if they lose power, there's no vehicle, no other party who can lead a government in Scotland and drive through, another independence referendum. But ultimately, the foundations are there for whatever point in the future that may come back round.
Okay, thank you, Kieran. Alex-Salmond, what's the last word with you? Do you want to come back on that?
Well, of course, that Kieran is one of the more intelligent commentariats, and I was very fair-minded. John has a particular issue in Parliament just now. I mean, he was appealing quite rightly for support across the Parliament, but he's not likely to get it from the Labour Party or gagging for the election. The Tories hate the SNP, as they make clear all the time. The Liberals are unreliable at best. The Green Party has been the source of the problem because the Green Party have dragged the SNP into a lot of issues which have been hopelessly divisive, as well as swallowing up a lot of money. But unfortunately for John, the Green Party are very important in the calculation. Now, I've advised him today that he should beat a path to Ash Regan's door or send his whips there. But Ash Regan can only protect, and she said she's willing to listen, and that's good. But Ash Regan of Alapa can only protect from no confidence votes.
Yes.
It can't get budget votes through. And that's going to be really tricky for finding that extra vote required to get budget votes through when so many of the parties are of a vested interest in being against them. And the Green Party would want to take them back up the highways and byways of identity politics. So to release yourself from the being a prisoner of the Greens without causing a conflation of your administration is going to be the abiding challenge for John Swinney.
All right, Alex-salmond, thank you for joining us, Alec, and thanks to Kieran Andrews. Now, in a moment, the ladies from Gaza are going to be, you'll hear my conversation with Donald Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton.